From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and coming up today, K-State's Terry Griffin is back with us to report on his new study of how quickly farmers adopt new precision cropping technology. This suggests that the sooner producers employ new technology, the more inclined they are to adopt the next technological advance. Then K-State's Doug Jardine will talk about a variety of rot diseases that are prevalent in Kansas corn and soybeans as our fall harvest progresses, what possible crop losses could result from these. He also cautions you grain sorghum producers about the possibility of stalk rot, making that crop vulnerable to lodging at harvest. And further ahead with another Stop, Look, and Listen, K-State's Gus Vander Hoeven. All this and more right here on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're listening to Agriculture Today, and for this segment, we've invited back in precision agriculture economist with K-State Research and Extension, Terry Griffin. He was here a few days back. You'll recall we mentioned he is now regularly posting updated information on various aspects of precision technology and the economics tied to that technology on the agmanager.info website. And here's his latest entry. Terry poses the question in this article, how long does it typically take before farmers adopt new technologies? This was the theme of an analysis that he has just completed. Terry, why this undertaking? What interested you about this question?
One of the questions that farmers give us quite often is, what technologies should I adopt and when should I adopt those? And that's a really hard question to answer. So what I would try to do with this study and others is tell farmers, well, your peer groups have done it this way. So it's more of a what was the optimal path that your peers have taken to the adoption of technology. That being said, some technology may not be right for your farm. Some may be, and the answer usually kind of depends. So what we wanted to do was look at KFMA farms and see when they adopted technology relative to when they could have adopted the technology. And this is referred to as duration analysis, duration being the length of time.
And in fact, in the last couple of years, you used Kansas Farm Management Association's system to collect data on the patterns of adoption, if you will, or the factors that drove producers to take on this technology or that, right?
Yes. So 2015, Kevin Herbal with KFMA, Kansas Farm Management Association, and I were chatting about this very idea of gathering adoption information from KFMA farmer members and then doing some financial analysis to determine, are precision farmers more profitable than their counterparts? Or alternatively, a good question would be, are precision farmers, were they more profitable before they adopted than their counterparts? And we're still working on those studies. As of right now, last month, we had 545 farms who had reported their adoption of the technology, and 399 of those were actively using some technology of some sort, and that's 73%. So what we wanted to do was look at that 73% of the respondents and compare when they adopted versus when they could have. And that's a good question of when could they have adopted? Well, one is if you started farming after the technology was commercialized, it would be the year you started farming. Okay. The other cornerstone in that equation is when that technology was commercialized.
And that was a little harder to pin down than you might have thought, you said.
That was much harder than I initially thought. And I was trying to pin this down about when yield monitors were commercialized, when automated guidance first came onto the market. And I thought I knew it, and I kind of did some Google searches and kind of refined what I thought I knew. Then, I did what anybody in our profession should do, just contact the experts. So I had a list of experts from across the United States working in precision ag, economists, engineers, agronomists. So we put this group together, and they all knew the answer when I asked, well, when were these technologies available commercially? But unfortunately, they all disagreed on when these things happened. So that caused a really good discussion. Long-term listeners may remember Randy Taylor, who was here at K-State. He was very instrumental in putting some of this together, and there was a couple dozen others from across the United States. And surprising fact was, well, one, everybody who thought they knew the answer disagreed. So none of us really knew. And two, it was been on the market much longer than any of us had even anticipated.
Specifically, what technologies were you measuring here? Again, yield monitors being among the first, GPS tied to those monitors as well. But what else were you chronicling?
So we had 10 technologies that were on our initial list, and these are the ones that we're familiar with. These are GPS guidance, automated guidance, to the type of technology that automatically controls the steering of the equipment going through the field. The predecessor to that one was light bar. The technology where you still manually controlled steering, except you have this GPS set of lights that kind of give you an indication of to go to the left or to the right. Automated section control on planters and sprayers, one of the relatively new technologies. But then we had yield monitors. We separated yield monitors into with and without GPS, and we had variable rate fertilizer and grid soil sampling.
But you lumped these into a couple of general categories here: embodied knowledge technology and information-intensive technology. Yes. Distinguish between those, if you would.
So precision ag is divided into two categories. One set of categories makes life easier. Other set of categories, let me say it this way, it empowers the farmer with more data. Okay, it may take more management skill in order to make use of those. So the automated guidance, automated section control. Well, basically if you have automated in a title, that means you have embodied knowledge. It took a lot of technology to make automated guidance work, but the user needs to understand almost nothing about the technology in order to make use of it. Well, yield monitors and variable rate fertility based upon manual algorithms, those take a lot more skill in order to make use of that technology because you're dealing with data. Okay, so the data side, yield monitors, soil sampling, I refer to those as information intensive.
That identified then, what did you discover about the rate of adoption of technology, the duration as you describe it, and the differences between the technologies, if any?
Sure. There were some differences, and is kind of what we expected for the most part. The automated technologies, the embodied knowledge technologies, were adopted sooner than information intensive, kind of for obvious reasons. We've seen some of the adoption graphs where yield monitors are, maybe less than half of Kansas farmers are using yield monitors, even though they've been on the market for decades. And whereas automated guidance, we're looking at about 80% of farms are using that technology, even though it's only been available since roughly 2000. So it has a much faster adoption rate. We knew this, but what we didn't know was that the duration analysis for light bars wasn't as quick as it was for other embodied knowledge technologies. And it made us kind of question, is the light bar truly embodied knowledge? Because, true, there's a lot of technology that went into making this thing work, and the user doesn't really have to understand it, but the user still has to do the same thing the user has always done, is steer the tractor. They have a visual reference, which is essentially a replacement for row markers or some other visual marker in the field. Well, we were questioning, should it be considered embodied knowledge because it didn't act like one with the duration analysis.
That said, did this shed more light on farmer tendencies as far as becoming comfortable with technology and therefore being more inclined to adopt further technology as it's rolled out?
It sure does. So one of the things we're trying to tease out is, well, for instance, automated section control is an automated technology. It's embodied knowledge, but it became available more recently than the other technologies on this list. It has become adopted very quickly, partly because it's a technology that makes life much better, saves money from not double applying seed chemicals. It's it's a win-win. It's one of those technologies that has a very quick payback to farms. The other thing that we're trying to tease out about that is, well, today in 2017, we have a different set of farmers than we did in 1997.
So much of this is inherent to them.
It could be inherent to the producers themselves, the people who grew up with smartphones and the internet and just from popular culture, they've a different set of people.
So, as an economist, what does all this suggest to you as you interact with producers and talk with them about investing in technology or considering the returns to that investment?
Sure. So, my general recommendation always when it comes to technology is if you do not see benefits outweighing the cost, then it's probably best to wait. But if you do see the benefits outweighing the cost, then let's consider adoption. And in particular, the thing to consider here is, well, let's speak to the agricultural industry, not necessarily to the farmers. The agricultural industry has done great strides of making the data side, the information-intensive side of precision ag, much more automated. Cloud computing is an example. So yield monitor data, instead of us looking at a field, one field at a time, and processing in the cloud, is making it more automated. Now, to address farmers in the audience, that type of technology, when we can make information-intensive technology, the data stuff, more automated, then we're going to start seeing a lot more adoption in that arena.
And it's a good read, producers. You should take a look at it on the agmanager.info website. Terry has just posted this. Again, the analysis of the duration of time as producers would adopt new technologies depending on the technology. And it does lend a bit of a different perspective, Terry, on the question.
A little bit different. And if you've got some good stories out there, I'd like to hear them about when you started using technology and why. Send me an email at twgriffin@ksu.edu or give me a call, and we'll like to hear about those.
Excellent. And again, his contact information is at agmanager.info likewise. Always a pleasure, Terry.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for coming over. Terry Griffin is a precision agriculture economist with K-State Research and Extension. We'll be back with more in a moment. This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
You are tuned in to Agriculture Today, and time for another roundup on late-season disease concerns in our row crops around Kansas, and focusing a fair amount today on the rot diseases we might find in the various crops. Doug Jardine is Mike's side once again. He's a row crop disease specialist with K-State Research and Extension. And some of these conditions Doug will talk about are fairly severe. Some are forecast, and we'll discuss that a bit further. But starting with ear rot in corn, what's happening and to what degree out there?
Well, Eric, recently I had a chance to take an extended survey of southeast and east central Kansas and get a picture on things. And then we've also been getting a number of samples into the diagnostic laboratory here on campus, which is, I think, kind of painting an interesting picture. Initially, we thought because of the late season drought in southeast Kansas that might stir up the Aspergillus ear rot, which, of course, causes aflatoxin. Mm-hmm. While I was surveying, again, a lot of the corn had already been harvested, but of the fields that were still standing, there was very little Aspergillus out there, and which is a good thing. We really didn't want it. And I think one of the things behind that is the rain really didn't shut off till about August 15th, and by then most of the corn was well far enough along in maturity that we didn't have Aspergillus problems. Now, there's another ear mold, that was quite high in that area, called Penicillium ear mold. We typically don't worry about that when it doesn't normally produce toxins under our climatic conditions that are going to be a problem. But in that case, they're losing a lot of ear tips to it, and so they're going to have a little bit of diminished quality and yield, but certainly nothing serious. More interestingly, we've been getting a lot of samples out of southwest Kansas with diplodia ear rot. And that was something that really caught me quite unexpected.
Rare for that area of the state?
It is. I mean, if we remember last year, we talked about a tremendous amount of diplodia down in south central Kansas where they got the 20-plus inches of rain in July. The 2 previous years, we'd seen a lot of diplodia ear rot in the Kansas River Valley. But out in western Kansas, southwestern Kansas, we're not used to getting summer rains. We're usually depending on, the irrigation, and that's typically not enough to get the diplodia started. But we've had like 3 samples in 1 week come in, which would be a lot, actually. And one was from Kiowa County, and one from Ford County, and one from Rice County. And I mean, they only sent individual ears, but those ears were very much infected. And what I don't know is what percentage of the fields might look like that. But the fact that they sent it in was an indication that there's enough that they were worried about it. The other ear rot of note is fusarium ear rot. When I was a couple weeks ago out surveying in western Kansas, I was finding some. It's typified in some cases by kind of a white starburst pattern on the kernels, especially at either end of the ear. But sometimes it's just kind of a generic white mold, might follow the tracks where the insects have fed on the ears or anything. And the reason that one is important is there's another toxin called fumonicin that can be important. I understand that there was a hog feeder in southwest Kansas that has rejected some corn because of fumonicin levels, or at least potential fumonicin levels in it. And so right away that sends a red flag up to guys that still have corn out in the field. Do I have the problem? Unfortunately, there are no labs in Kansas that test for it. And fumonicin is probably a toxin that's flown under the radar over the years. It's really not much of an issue in the beef industry. Cattle tolerate fairly high levels of it. And unless you had a contract for food-grade corn with, one of our taco chip companies or whatever, you probably wouldn't be concerned about it. But we do know that the 2 species that are most sensitive to fumonicin are hogs and horses. So, the fact that some of the hog operations are looking for that, it's a heads up to guys. There may be some issues, but without good lab testing available, I don't know if we'll have a full handle on that.
And as far as managing against these ear rots, though, for the future, they're driven by climatic conditions almost exclusively. So even in hybrid selection, one can't gain too much on these, can they?
Well, there are differences, but they're not the things that the companies report in their product descriptions. Yeah. As we drive around, we'll see company A or B or C will have these test strips out with 3 or 4 or 8 or 10 or 15 hybrids out there. Those test plots are out there for growers to stop and look at. And if it's an area where the disease happens to be endemic that year, you can go in and see some differences and take some notes. With the bacterial streak that we've talked about previously, that's how we kind of discovered that there were differences in hybrids last year up in Nebraska. There was a test spot, and clearly there were some hybrids that were fairly resistant to it and others that were quite susceptible. But that's about all you can do, honestly. You are correct. Each one of those ear rots has a specific set of weather conditions that when they occur, you're going to be more prone to those particular ear rots.
Charcoal rot in soybeans, something we discuss seemingly every fall, Doug, and it's likely that in some soybean stands here or there, we will see this condition. Is that the situation this year?
Well, absolutely. And, if you look at the national statistics for diseases, clearly on a national basis, soybean cyst nematode is the number 1 disease. But here in Kansas, it's a distant second to charcoal rot. We probably... and I should have looked this up before I came over, but we probably average maybe as high as 5% annual yield loss. The last 2 years, when we've had some pretty good rainfalls during the grain fill period, that number's been down less than 1%.
This is drought-driven, this condition.
Drought-driven, but if we look back into the 90s and a couple of the really big drought years, and even back to 2012, I think in a couple of years we've been in the 15 to 20% range. Well, I'm still determining what that number is going to be this year, but we're probably going to be above average. And I mentioned that they had about a 30-day dry period in southeast Kansas, pretty much from the 15th of August to the 30th of August. It did not rain down there. And we had some pretty hot days, if people remember, along the way. And while the corn was far enough along to make it, the soybeans weren't. And I saw a lot of charcoal rot on my recent tour down there. Now, I will say people that were planting Group 5 beans, those are looking pretty good because back during that period, they were still in the vegetative state. And at that point, vegetative soybeans are able to tolerate the hot, dry weather much better than beans that are trying to fill. But guys who have, early to mid Group 4s out there, I think they're going to be pretty disappointed with some of their yields. In some cases, it looks like the field has matured normally, but if you walk out into it and examine the stems, they're just covered with the charcoal rot sclerotia, which tells me that field probably finished maybe 2 to 3 weeks earlier than what it should have. So whatever yield gain would have made in the final 2 or 3 weeks of grain fill, that's probably going to be what their grain loss is. So we're guys that are expecting 40 bushels, they may be seeing 30, and we'll just have to wait and see. But most fields in southeast and east central Kansas had at least spots out in the field that were clearly suffering from charcoal rot. Now, on the other hand, I talked to a friend from up in the Atchison, Donovan County area. They have some areas up there that receive some timely rains, and they were reporting yields pushing almost 90 bushels. So I think there's going to be a very wide swing this year in yields, but certainly areas that were droughty through August and into September, we're going to see a significant amount of charcoal rot this year. I've not had the chance to get to central Kansas, except I drove to Salina over the weekend and did note some of the fields along I-70. There definitely were what I would determine to be patches of charcoal rot. It's out there.
If charcoal rot is a habitual problem for a grower, would the individual want to think about changing groups as far as planting next spring?
Well, 2 things with charcoal rot, Mange. The later the maturity group that you can get away with, the better off you're going to be, and then reduce stand counts. 100,000 is more than enough plants per acre. If it rains, they'll branch and you'll still get yield. If it doesn't rain, you won't have as much charcoal rot.
Quickly now, we want to acknowledge that the potential for stalk rot in its various forms in grain sorghum is out there, and that you want producers to be on alert for that as we draw closer to harvest time for the potential of lodging.
Right, and just real quickly, so the conditions that are favorable for the Fusarium ear rot we just talked about in corn are also the same conditions that are going to be favorable for Fusarium stalk rot. And I know last year we had some serious lodging issues. Most of the sorghum isn't far enough along yet, honestly, to see if it's going to be a problem. But I would encourage growers to go out and scout those fields as they're getting near maturity. And if those stems are feeling particularly spongy or particularly thin, they may want to target those fields for early harvest, even if the grain moisture is just a little high. Because I think the penalty for high grain moisture is going to be less than the penalty for driving slow and trying to pick up down stalks.
And we'd refer folks to a brand new article in the Extension Agronomy Update newsletter dated this past Friday, September the 29th, which covers this latter item in full, stalk rots in grain sorghum, complemented with pictures which illustrate the condition. That's at agronomy.ksu.edu. Doug will check in with you again further on as the harvest progresses here in Kansas. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
That's the latest on diseases we're finding in our common row crops in Kansas, corn, grain, sorghum, and soybeans. Doug Jardine is a row crop disease specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Agriculture Today returns in a moment on this, the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And next up, today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the nominations of Stephen Sensky to be the next USDA Deputy Secretary and Ted McKinney to be Undersecretary of Agriculture for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs were approved easily in a voice vote by the Senate last evening. The USDA's Rod Bain reports.
The Agriculture Department has 2 more members of its leadership team in place.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the en bloc consideration of the following nominations.
Nominations: Department of Agriculture, Stephen Sensky of Missouri to be Deputy Secretary, Ted McKinney of Indiana to be Undersecretary.
I ask consent the Senate vote on the nominations en bloc with no intervening action or debate.
The question occurs on the nominations en bloc. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Nominations are confirmed.
U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell among senators Tuesday night approving Sensky and McKinney's nominations. They joined Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, who said in a statement they will bring steady leadership to the department. 2 additional Undersecretary nominees, Nebraska Ag Director Greg Eibach and Iowa Ag Secretary Bill Northey, will have their confirmation hearings before the Senate Ag Committee on Thursday. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Meanwhile, Senate Agriculture Committee ranking member Debbie Stabenow says she wants a meeting with controversial USDA nominee Sam Clovis, the White House choice to be the Undersecretary for Research, Extension, and Economics. Quoting Stabenow, "Our farmers and ranchers depend on science. The whole idea of a chief scientist is someone who has a commitment to science." In her words, "I don't think this gentleman meets the criteria." The USDA formally announced yesterday that roughly $8 billion will be paid to producers this month under the Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage programs for the 16-17 crop year that ended September the 30th. The USDA did not release specific details on the county yields for ARC County payments for major crops such as corn and soybeans. Producers need to receive details on ARC County payment rates from the individual county FSA offices in which they have base acres for those payments to be determined. The USDA noted that more than 500,000 farmers will receive ARC payments. More than 250,000 will receive PLC payments for the 16-17 crops starting this week. As we covered yesterday with K-State's Art Barnaby, the National Agricultural Statistics Service had already released the final market year average prices for the 16-17 crop year. To recap there, $3.36 a bushel for corn, putting the national PLC payment rate at 34 cents per bushel. Soybean producers will not collect a PLC payment due to the market year average price of $9.47 a bushel, which was higher than the $8.40 reference price. Wheat growers enrolled in PLC will have a payment rate of $1.61 per bushel due to the market year average of $3.89 a bushel. That's subtracted from the $5.50 per bushel reference price. And grain sorghum producers enrolled in PLC will see a payment rate of $1.16 a bushel based on the $2.79 market year average price subtracted from the $3.95 per bushel reference price. Along with ARC and PLC payments, the USDA also announced $1.6 billion in payments under the Conservation Reserve Program for 2017 as well. And Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue has reaffirmed his support for the biotech labeling program passed by Congress last year when he presided over a listening session on reducing regulation. That session focused on how the USDA could reduce regulation. However, a participant told the secretary that the food industry wants the biotech labeling program, which was passed to avoid state labeling on the content of foods with genetically modified ingredients. Perdue said he had been strongly communicating to the Office of Management and Budget that Congress had passed the labeling program and that it would save money for the industry. You're tuned into Agriculture Today. Well, winners at the recent Kansas Junior Livestock Show in Hutchinson earned cash premiums for their livestock. Others were presented scholarships for excelling academically, in community service, and in 4-H and FFA activities. Todd Domer has the results from the show right here, which featured 702 youth from 92 counties showing 1,480 head of livestock.
Ben Jensen of Cortland led the Grand Champion Market steer, a 1,387-pound Chianina. Jensen received a $4,000 premium. The reserve champion steer, weighing 1,374 pounds, came from the All Other Breeds division and was owned by Baylor Dio of Ulysses, who received $2,000. Macy Ratliff of Westphalia earned Supreme Champion honors with her limousine heifer worth a $1,000 premium. Reserve Supreme Champion, worth $750, was a Hereford heifer exhibited by Wesley Denton from Blue Rapids. Madison Loschke from Kingsdown took the Champion Senior Cattle Showmanship title, while Jace Belts of Canton won the Junior Cattle Showmanship. James DeRushi of St. Mary's guided his 277-pound light crossbred to the Grand Champion Market Hog title, which was worth $2,000. A 290-pound Duroc owned by Gracie Ferguson from Quenemo was the Reserve Grand Hog, worth a $1,500 premium. Brody Nemechek of Iola took the Champion Senior Swine Showmanship title, while Abby Lillard of Abilene was the Champion Junior Swine Showman. Jillian Keller from Pickaway exhibited the Grand Champion Market Lamb, a 126-pound blackface that earned $2,000. The Reserve Grand Champion Market Lamb, a 145-pound blackface, was shown by Hannah Whetstone of Howard, who earned $1,000. In the Senior Sheep Showmanship division, Becca Payne of Hutchinson was named champion, while Clay Brillhart from Fort Scott won the Junior Sheep Showmanship. Riley Stewart of Baldwin City received Grand Champion honors and a $2,000 premium for his 87-pound meat goat. Luke Falkenstein of Oswego showed the Reserve Grand Meat Goat, which weighed 83 pounds and earned $1,000. Champion Senior Goat Showman honors went to Jillian Keller of Pickaway, with Jarrah Schoenfeld of Oakley winning the Junior Goat Showmanship. The Junior Livestock Show presented $20,000 in scholarships. Recipients were Ryan Allison, Fort Scott, Shay Dewar, Onega, Chad Hibden, Princeton, Mason Rumpf, Scandia, Michael Dowd, Olathe, Jade Edwards, Hamilton, Ben Jensen, Cortland, and Catherine Krause of Russell. The Kansas Livestock Association, K-State, and the Agribusiness Council of Wichita serve as major show sponsors. I'm Todd Domer.
And we extend our congratulations to all those successful exhibitors and scholarship winners at this year's KJLS. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen. This is our state, Kansas.
In the last few weeks, I've come to respect and treasure another small corner of Kansas.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
Many of us love our country. I'm not talking politics here. No, I'm talking the country, the land, the mountains, the plains, its rivers, the sky, and its history. And we may have different reasons why we love it. We may love our own state more than other states, even though we may visit there for vacations. Some people may love more than one country, maybe because they were born there or their parents were born there, and it may be a particular place means more than just the other country. It may be the place where we live in our state, even our country, which we love more, and that may be exactly why we are fond of, or as I said, love where we are. It is often the very small, the farm which has been in the family, which gives us our daily comfort, as it is home. The other evening, I slowly walked my hill, following the mowed path. There was a half moon high overhead. Earlier, I had sat on a bench under the cedar and watched moths flutter about. It was a beautiful evening with evening clouds pressing in. This is probably the closest I can feel home. My place, my Hackford. And Hackford reminds me of when I was young in the Netherlands, in the Achterhoek. Hackford, the old castle, and the woods, and the farmland around it. It sustains me. But sometimes something happens, and then comes another piece of land which makes new history. And that history bonds one to that land. It does not need to be big. It can be very small. I will give you an example. It could be a grave. And mind you, it doesn't need to be a grave of a loved one. It can be a grave of a pet. We have a view of those on the farm where I, the kids and grandkids have buried their beloved dogs. A neighbor buried her horse on a slope. These small places hold special meaning, and it seems that life seems to add to them as things happen, both good and sad. In the last few weeks, I've come to respect and treasure another small corner of Kansas. Actually, it's not a corner, but the top of another hill, a Kansas hill. I'm talking about KU Medical Center, or as described in a flyer, the University of Kansas Hospital neighborhood. The hospital leans against the state line road, but the neighborhood spills over into Missouri. And across the line we found Anna's restaurant. Oh, so welcoming, and a good place to rest and eat. On an angle across the old street, we found a second-hand bookstore, a gem of a place, and it made us think of our dusty bookshelf here in Aggieville. Books, books and more books. I walked out with two more books, as if I don't have enough books. But it was therapy I could use. I could feel rooted in the books in the basement floor and above. When I saw the book, The Bison in Art, I knew I would go home with it even before I looked at the price. The picture depicts an era which I will never see. It is no more. But the bison, or as we say the buffalo, was the animal of our open ranges. I'm very thankful I found it. Another book I picked up was Last Refuge, the Environmental Showdown in Yellowstone and the American West by Jim Robbins. The topics are of interest to me, and they touch on land, our land. The week that I stayed close to KU, I walked the 4 streets around the hospital complex several times. Rainbow Boulevard, 39th Avenue, State Line Road. I admired the old neighborhood with its big trees. From the 4th and 5th floor in the hospital, I had a great overview. I could recognize Anna's place and the bookstore, a very good feeling among the confusion. While I was there, I learned that indeed surgeons fix things. But by golly, the nurses heal. We met many nurses and staff, fantastic people. They were professionals with love. There was Jordan, Adela, Emily, Christian with C and a K, Jenny, Grace, Serena, Zach, Aaron, and John. I can't list all of them as I would take too long a time. But all were special people. Outside Lee directed traffic going in while the construction crews were working. I passed him several times a day going in and out. We introduced each other and we shook hands. He understood why I was there. I will always remember him too. While walking, I was impressed with the way the grounds, little open space there is, was kept with flowers, shrubs, and small and bigger trees. And plants were placed in their preferred location. Well done. The walk I walked to the main entrance past a narrow border filled with shrubs and begonias. One day I noticed that next to the concrete walk, a small seedling tree grew. It was a sycamore or London plane tree. And there it was, a weed, only 3 inches tall. It was a weed in that location. I carefully dug it up with its tiny root. I immediately placed it carefully in a container with soil I had brought with me and gave it some water out of my water bottle. I've brought the tiny seedling home. It will grow into a tree, a big tree, a sturdy tree. I know it will, as I will care for it. It's my connection to a very special place.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas. That brings our Wednesday edition to a close. Thanks for being along with us. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.